I never expected to find a mountain of rotting furniture, half a mannequin, and a toilet brush collection in my garage. But there it was, piled to the ceiling like some twisted episode of Hoarders. And when I asked the HOA president Karen what the hell was going on, she smugly replied, "Oh, that your garage is part of the new community storage initiative." I blinked. Once. Twice. Then asked the only logical question that came to mind. "So you're saying this is legal?" Karen just smiled and handed me a stapled packet of nonsense bylaws, the kind printed in Comic Sans and riddled with typos. That was the moment I decided to burn it all down, metaphorically speaking, of course. Or maybe not. Because 3 days later, I went live on Facebook with a smirk on my face and a phone in my hand, about to auction off every single piece of that junk right in front of 40,000 viewers. It all began 2 weeks earlier when I returned from a work trip to find my driveway blocked by a moving truck and my garage door wide open. I was still rolling my suitcase when I saw 2 guys wrestling a broken pool table through the opening, its legs dragging across my epoxy-coated floor like claws on a chalkboard. I yelled, "Hold up, what are you doing? That's my garage." The guys paused only long enough to say, "Sorry bro, HOA orders," before tossing in a box labeled "Seasonal Inflatable Graveyard." I marched up the drive in disbelief, stepping over what I swear was a bucket of used candles. That's when I saw Karen leaning against the truck like a Walmart Napoleon, clipboard in hand and aviators on despite the fact it was overcast. I asked her what was going on and she responded in her signature, condescending tone, "The HOA board has decided to implement a temporary storage solution for community overflow. It's only fair that everyone shares their unused space. You weren't home, so we assumed you'd be cooperative." I stared at her for a solid 10 seconds trying to process the sheer insanity of what I was hearing. I wasn't just flabbergasted, I was violated. My garage was the one place I kept sacred, clean, organized, and smelling faintly of cedar and motor oil. Now it reeked of mothballs and regret. When I tried to shut the garage door, she stepped in and said, "If you obstruct the storage process, you could be in violation of Section 4-something-something. That's literally what she said. Something-something. I laughed, but it came out wrong, more like the cackle of a man standing on the edge of a breakdown. I took a breath, turned around, and walked back into my house, because if I stayed any longer I might have turned that clipboard into a boomerang. Over the next few days more and more junk appeared. A tower of rusted filing cabinets, a collection of empty fish tanks, 3 broken microwaves, and a velvet painting of dogs playing poker that haunted me. Every time I opened the garage a new horror awaited. One morning I found a life-size replica of a Dalek from Doctor Who and a mannequin with no arms wearing a prom dress. I wish I was making that up. Even my dog refused to go near the place. The smell had evolved from funky to full biohazard, and I had to wear a mask just to do laundry since the washer was in there too. I tried filing a complaint with the HOA, but surprise surprise, Karen had locked the board email and phone line behind some fake maintenance excuse. No one else on the board responded, either probably too scared or too annoyed to deal with her. I even contacted the city, but they said since it was a private HOA matter their hands were tied. I realized then this wasn't just about junk. It was about control. Karen wanted to send a message that she ran this neighborhood and no one could stop her. But she underestimated 2 things about me. First, I'm stubborn. Second, I'm petty. And petty beats power when you've got internet access and time on your hands. I started documenting everything. Photos, videos, daily logs. I looked like a war journalist embedded in a suburban garbage conflict. The real turning point came when I found out from another neighbor that Karen had forged a vote claiming unanimous consent for this new storage policy. Except I had never voted, nor had 6 other residents I spoke to. That was the crack I needed in her fake empire. The idea for the Facebook Live sale came to me while watching an old reality show where someone auctioned off storage unit contents. It hit me like lightning. If they want to treat my garage like a storage unit, then fine, I'll hold a public auction. Except I'll do it online where everyone can see just how insane this has gotten. I set up cameras cleaned up just enough to make the junk look ironically valuable, and started teasing the event online with captions like "Guess what my HOA gave me for free in Junkapalooza this Saturday, everything must go, even the mannequin's hat." People were hooked. Comments rolled in fast. "Whoa, is this real? This can't be legal. I'm watching this with popcorn." I made a flyer and slid it under Karen's door just to let her know this wasn't going to be quiet. Then on Saturday afternoon I hit that little blue Go Live button. My phone lit up like a Christmas tree. Hundreds of viewers became thousands. And I smiled into the lens and said welcome to the first annual HOA Garage Purge sponsored by Neighborhood Tyranny and Passive Aggression. Within 10 minutes I had sold a lava lamp for $40 and a VHS player for $70. Someone bought a mounted deer head named Lester and requested I sign it. Every time I sold something I gave a dramatic backstory, like this chair once hosted a HOA meeting so intense it burst into flames. People ate it up. The comments were wild. Someone tipped me $10 just to kick a pile of deflated soccer balls. Another viewer offered to send Karen a fruit basket labeled Karma. Just as I was auctioning off an unopened box labeled Todd's emergency underwear kit, the garage door flew open and Karen barged in like a deranged mall cop. She screamed, "Stop this instant, you're committing a felony." I calmly replied, "Actually, Karen, you're the one who committed property fraud by staging a fake vote to use my garage. And guess what? This whole thing is being recorded." The live chat exploded. Karen tried to grab the phone, but I moved quicker. The camera caught her flailing like a fish on a trampoline. That's when a local news reporter, who had seen the stream in real time, showed up on my driveway. She wanted an interview. Karen wanted to vanish. But instead of fading quietly, she made one last threat: "I'm calling the police." I said great and waved her toward the camera. "Can you do it on speaker for the audience? Everyone's dying to hear your legal theory." Karen stormed out and I sold her patio umbrella for $20 5 minutes later. That night, as I wrapped up the stream with a grand total of over $2,000 and 100,000 views, I realized something. You don't need a legal degree or a pitchfork to fight a petty tyrant. Sometimes all you need is Wi-Fi, a junk pile, and the will to go live. The aftermath of the Facebook Live auction felt like the calm after a hilarious hurricane. My phone was buzzing non-stop with messages, follow requests, and screenshots of Karen's meltdown that were already circulating in meme group. One even captioned her mid-scream face with, "When you realize the garage you hijacked is now a flea market." I wasn't just some guy with a pile of junk anymore. I was the guy who turned HOA tyranny into a viral garage sale. It should have felt like a victory, but the real war hadn't even started yet. The morning after the sale, I woke up to find a neon orange violation notice taped to my front door with masking tape. Not HOA standard tape, mind you, just masking tape. And the notice wasn't typed, it was handwritten in angry cursive. It accused me of unauthorized community liquidation, distribution of items without board consent, and my favorite line, suspicion of inciting social media riots. Karen's handwriting looked like she was trying to carve letters into the paper with her pen. I chuckled, peeled it off, and stuck it to my fridge like a trophy. By lunchtime, things started escalating. I was on a video call for work when I heard a loud knock at the door. I opened it to find 2 police officers standing there, flanked by none other than Karen, who wore a smirk that screamed, "I finally got you." She clutched a folder bulging with printouts and waved it around like it was a holy relic. The taller officer said they received a report of possible theft and needed to ask me a few questions. Karen jumped in before I could respond, rambling about how I sold priceless family heirlooms and violated property rights. Her performance was Oscar-worthy, if the Oscars were held in a Walmart parking lot. I invited the officers inside and offered them water. Karen tried to follow, but I stopped her at the door with a polite smile and said, "Sorry, this garage is no longer a community center." She fumed on the porch while I showed the officers the original deed to my house, my garage's legal boundaries, and most importantly, the security footage I'd saved showing people dropping off junk uninvited. The footage clearly showed Karen with a bolt cutter and clipboard directing the junk brigade. One of the officers raised an eyebrow and asked, "So she organized this?" I just nodded and hit replay. After 15 awkward minutes, the officers thanked me and left. Karen stayed behind for a second, staring at me through the screen door like a character from a low-budget horror movie. Her smile had vanished, replaced by something meaner and colder. "You've made a powerful enemy," she hissed. I shrugged and replied, "Well then maybe you should have picked a different garage to mess with." She stomped off down the walkway, heels clicking like an angry metronome. Later that evening, I fired up Facebook Live again, this time titled, "HOA threatens to arrest me for selling garbage they dumped." Viewership exploded. I showed the violation notice, played snippets of the security footage, and narrated everything like a drama podcast. People were hooked. Comments flooded in. Someone said I should run for HOA president. Another offered to send me legal advice. But the real bombshell came when a woman named Lily messaged me privately. She said she used to be on the HOA board until Karen forced her out last year in a sketchy election. According to her, Karen had been abusing her position for years, bending the rules, rewriting policies on the fly, and silencing dissent by spreading fake rumors or threatening fines. Lily even sent me copies of old emails that proved Karen had faked community votes before. That changed everything. It meant I wasn't just fighting over junk. I was up against an HOA dictator who had created her own little empire of fear and passive aggression. I decided to fight smarter. I compiled all the emails, footage, screenshots, and documents into a digital folder labeled HOA Exposed and shared it with 3 neighbors I trusted. Then I printed copies of everything and mailed them anonymously to the rest of the HOA board members, just in case they didn't know what Karen had been up to. I also added a letter urging them to call an emergency meeting before things got worse. The next day, I noticed something strange. A few of the neighbors who had previously ignored me now waved as I walked my dog. One even said, "Hey, I saw your video. That Karen lady's nuts." Turns out, the Facebook stream had made its way into the local neighborhood app and was being discussed in group chat. I was becoming something I never expected, a symbol of petty justice. And I loved it. Of course, Karen wasn't going down without a fight. She launched her counterattack the way all truly petty villains do, with paperwork. That week, I received 3 more violation notices, each more ridiculous than the last. One fined me for excessive social media activity disrupting community peace. Another claimed my garage sale compromised property value due to unsightly public auctioning. The third said my dog's barking was a disturbance, even though I didn't have a dog that barked. It was my neighbor's Pomeranian named Zeus. Karen had either gone off the deep end or she was tossing spaghetti at the wall to see what stuck. Fed up, I called my cousin Tom, a contract lawyer and expert in HOA nonsense. He's also a petty genius and loves taking on absurd battles. After I explained everything, he said, "Send me the files and give me a week. I'll turn her bylaws into confetti." A few days later, Tom sent back a letter on official-looking letterhead with enough legal jargon to make a law professor weep. It basically said Karen's actions constituted abuse of power, misappropriation of private property, and possible fraud. I printed it out and slid it under her door with a post-it note that read, "Karen, you might want to read this before issuing your next violation for breathing too loudly." That night, I held another live stream titled, "Legal Showdown Coming, HOA Tyranny Faces the Law." I read parts of the letter out loud and shared updates from other residents who had come forward with similar complaints. One neighbor even revealed that Karen had told her to remove her bird feeder because it was too cheerful. Another said she was fined for using colored mulch. The stories just kept coming, each one crazier than the last, and every one fueled the fire. The following morning, I woke up to find a different kind of notice on my door, not from the HOA, but from the city. It was a request to contact the Municipal Oversight Committee. Turns out someone had forwarded the videos and evidence to a city councilman, who now wanted to open an investigation into the HOA's practices. That was when I realized this had grown beyond my garage. This was about every resident who'd been too scared, too tired, or too fed up to fight back. Karen must have felt it too. Her daily walks became shorter, her smile tighter. She started avoiding eye contact, and I noticed the clipboard was gone. It was like watching a cartoon villain realize their plan to build a laser on the moon was falling apart. Meanwhile, I kept selling off whatever was left in the garage. A viewer from Arizona bought a cracked lava lamp for $20 plus shipping. A lady from Texas bought 3 metal folding chairs for her backyard chickens. Every item that left my property felt like a victory. By the end of the week, I'd not only cleared my garage, but made over $3,000. More importantly, I had turned the tide. Neighbors who once ignored me now stopped by with cookies and gossip. People who had once feared Karen were talking about petitions and elections. I wasn't just a homeowner anymore, I was the spark of a full-blown neighborhood uprising. And the best part, one hadn't even played the biggest card yet. Because in the middle of this madness, I had discovered something far more incriminating than broken microwaves or creepy mannequins. I found the video. The one where Karen admitted on camera to forging the vote count in last year's HOA election. And I knew exactly when and where I was going to drop that bomb. But for now I just smiled, sipped my coffee, and waved at Karen as she passed by my window. The real show was just beginning. 2 days after the city councilman's office reached out, my neighborhood transformed from a quiet cul-de-sac into the set of a political drama. Word had spread that the city was looking into the HOA, and suddenly, people who had never so much as waved at each other were swapping Karen horror stories like war veterans comparing scars. It was like the lid had been ripped off the pressure cooker. But Karen, ever the delusional dictator, wasn't about to surrender gracefully. No, she doubled down in the only way she knew how: more rules, more threats, and a twisted new plan she probably thought was genius. I came home from running errands to find a large yellow sign staked into my lawn. It read, "This property is under investigation by the HOA for breach of community trust." Beneath that, in smaller letters, "Pending probation status. Approach with caution." I stood there staring at it for a full minute, trying to process the insanity. Karen had literally labeled me like I was a dangerous wild animal. Neighbors walked by, pretending not to stare, though a few gave me sympathetic nods. I yanked the sign out of the ground and threw it into the garage, where it landed on top of a box labeled, "Slightly burnt holiday decor." That night, I received an anonymous envelope slid under my door. Inside was a printed HOA agenda with a scribbled note at the bottom that read, "She's planning something big. Meeting Thursday. Come prepared." No name, no return address. Just those words. It was like a bad spy movie. Still, I wasn't surprised. Karen had already shown she was capable of pushing the limits of her authority. What worried me was that the other board members might finally be folding under her pressure. She ruled through exhaustion. Her tactic was simple: wear everyone down until she was the only one left standing. I brought this to Tom, my cousin/legal warrior, who just laughed and said, "Great. I was hoping we'd go full courtroom drama. Let's give them a little legal symphony." He helped me draft a formal notice of intent to sue for unlawful use of private property, defamation, and abuse of authority. He even highlighted the HOA's own bylaws where Karen had clearly violated multiple clauses, including entering private property without consent and falsely representing board consensus. We decided the best time to deliver this wasn't quietly or by mail. No, I would read it out loud at the upcoming meeting, with witnesses and, if possible, another Facebook live stream. Thursday came fast. I arrived at the clubhouse early, setting up my phone on a discreet tripod. The room slowly filled with residents, many of them clutching coffee cups and whispering behind raised hands. Karen entered last, wearing a navy blazer that made her look like she was auditioning for a courtroom reality show. She strutted up to the front, adjusted the mic, and launched into a monologue about the decay of neighborhood standards and rogue residents undermining community harmony. It was almost impressive how she could weaponize buzzwords without saying anything useful. Then she pulled out a folder and began passing out documents to the board members. I caught a glimpse as one passed by, a proposal titled Temporary HOA Receivership of Privately Owned Units. She was trying to gain legal control over problematic properties. My property. The document even included a list of contingency homes for testing, with mine right at the top. My pulse spiked. Karen wasn't just playing hardball. She was trying to rewrite reality. I raised my hand. She tried to ignore me, so I stood up and cleared my throat loudly. People turned. Phones came out. I could hear my own live stream humming quietly in my pocket. I stepped forward, unfolded my paper, and said, "Since we're discussing breaches of community trust, allow me to present an official legal response." Karen's face froze. I began reading the letter from Tom, quoting every violation, naming every statute she had broken, and finishing with the warning that we were prepared to take this to civil court. When I got to the part about security footage showing her using bolt cutters to enter my garage, the room went dead silent. Then I played a clip on my phone, the one where she laughed while saying, "He won't even notice. He's always out of town anyway." Gasp. One man muttered, "That's a lawsuit waiting to happen." A woman whispered, "Oh my God. She said that." Karen tried to speak, but her mic had been muted by one of the board members. The same board member stood and said, "I move that we table this entire receivership discussion until these legal matters are resolved." Another board member quickly seconded it. Then someone else, an older woman I hadn't even met before, stood and said, "I move to suspend Karen pending a formal review." That was met with murmurs and nods. A vote was called. 3 out of 5 board members voted yes. Karen stood abruptly, face flushed, knocking over her water bottle. She shouted something about betrayal and conspiracies, but no one was listening. She stormed out of the clubhouse as I quietly ended the livestream with a wink. The next morning, someone had spray-painted "Dictator No More" in pink chalk on the sidewalk outside the clubhouse. It was quickly washed away, but the message was loud and clear. Karen's grip on the community was slipping. But I knew she wouldn't retreat completely. Narcissists never do. Sure enough, she posted a rambling, unhinged letter on the HOA bulletin board claiming she was the victim of a smear campaign and accusing me of hacking HOA servers. She even alleged that I had recruited foreign trolls to attack her online. Yes, she really said trolls. In response, I decided it was time to drop the final nuke. I uploaded the video, the one where Karen, slightly buzzed at a community barbecue last summer, had bragged to 2 residents about how she fudged the HOA board election by tossing out absentee ballots and replacing them with friendlier ones. I had been recording that night because I was testing a new outdoor camera. I never expected it to capture anything other than raccoons. But there she was, on record, laughing about cheating an election. The video hit Facebook like a thunderclap. Within an hour, it was being reshared by local news pages. A local podcast featured it the same day. The city council's office released a statement saying they were conducting a formal inquiry into HOA election integrity. Residents began demanding Karen be permanently banned from holding any position in the HOA. One even started printing shirts that read, "Not today, Karen." By the weekend, Karen was effectively persona non grata. She no longer attended meetings. Her name was quietly removed from HOA communications. One neighbor claimed she'd seen her packing up boxes late at night. Another said they overheard her screaming into her phone about being ambushed by digital terrorists. As for me, I was hailed as something ridiculous like the HOA Avenger by a Reddit thread dedicated to neighborhood drama. But victory didn't feel smug. It felt solid, like justice had finally seeped through the cracks of the concrete streets and settled in. My garage, once a chaotic junkyard, now stood empty and echoing with possibility. I had already received dozens of messages asking what I planned to do next. Turn it into a podcast studio? Launch a neighborhood watchdog group? Start a line of HOA-themed revenge candles? I wasn't sure. But what I did know was this: Karen had underestimated the wrong guy. She thought a garage was just a garage. But to me, it was the last inch of sanity in a world ruled by control freaks and clipboard tyrants. And when they came for it, I didn't just fight back. I turned it into a battlefield where the whole world could watch. By Monday morning, the neighborhood had flipped on its axis. People who used to hide behind closed blinds during HOA meetings were now actively chatting on sidewalks and posting support messages online. The phrase "GarageGate" had officially taken hold, even showing up on bumper stickers someone made and passed out for free. What began as a Facebook Live auction had grown into a grassroots movement. Karen's power crumbled not because of violence or confrontation, but because a community that had been asleep finally woke up and saw what had been rotting under their noses. All it took was one absurdly illegal junk invasion and a guy who refused to stay quiet. The HOA held its emergency reformation meeting in the community clubhouse that Friday. The parking lot was full for the first time in years. Residents packed the chairs, stood in corners, even peeked through the windows outside. This was no ordinary meeting. It was the day we would vote on removing the remainder of the existing board, rewriting several bylaws, and electing a new president. I hadn't planned on running, but somehow my name had ended up on the nomination sheet. I knew exactly who had done it: Elaine, the chair hoarder who once stacked 22 folding chairs in her garage and now proudly wore a reformed junker shirt. She caught my eye as I walked in and gave a thumbs up. The meeting began with formalities, but the energy in the room was electric. One by one, residents stood to share their grievances, many of which had simmered quietly for years. A retired veteran named Gus spoke about being fined for putting up an American flag that wasn't HOA compliant. A mother of 3 described being threatened for having colorful flower pot. A young couple revealed they were almost blocked from moving in because Karen claimed their car was too noisy. The pattern was undeniable. Karen had created an empire of microcontrol, using fear disguised as order, and the community had been too weary to resist, until now. I was called up to speak halfway through. I hadn't written anything down, but the words came easily. I reminded everyone what this fight had been about. Not just my garage or the bizarre decision to turn it into a dumping ground, but about ownership. Not just of property, but of rights, respect, and voice. I told them how we let one person hijack an entire system because we thought fighting back wouldn't be worth the hassle. But if I learned anything from watching people bid on a broken microwave for $40, it was this: petty power only wins when good neighbors stay silent. My speech wasn't perfect, but it didn't have to be. The crowd stood and applauded, not because I was eloquent, but because they knew exactly what I meant. Voting took place by anonymous ballot. People lined up in silence and dropped slips into a clear box. Afterward, as the votes were tallied, the mood shifted from tense to almost festive. Someone played music from their phone. Kids ran around outside. It felt like a block party that no one planned but everyone needed. When the results came in, there was no surprise. Elaine had won the presidency by a landslide, and every remaining board member who had supported Karen was voted out. Replacements were voted in from among neighbors who actually showed up, who listened, who cared. For the first time in years, it felt like our HOA was ours again. Karen never showed up to the meeting. Rumor had it she was holed up inside her house, blinds drawn, still trying to contact some obscure HOA legal agency in Arizona. But no lawyer could undo what was happening on the ground. The system had moved on, and she was no longer part of it. The final nail came later that week when a city official announced the HOA was being placed under temporary review pending reforms, including independent oversight of future elections and stricter limits on board power. The phrase, check and balance, was finally more than just decorative wording in the bylaws. The very next day, I opened my garage doors and welcomed a group of volunteers who had signed up for what I jokingly called the Great Purge Aftermath. Together, we removed the last of the leftover junk, power washed the floor, repainted the walls, and installed new shelving. One neighbor donated a smart lock system to ensure no one could break in again. Another dropped off cold drinks and pizza for everyone. It was more than a cleanup, it was a reset. The garage wasn't just mine again. It was a symbol of what could happen when people stood up for themselves. Somewhere in the middle of all that, Elaine approached me with a grin. She said she had a surprise and handed me a package. Inside was a custom-made metal sign that read, "This space was liberated by Facebook Live." I laughed so hard I nearly dropped it. I hung it proudly above the workbench and made a mental note to turn it into the first thing visitors saw during the inevitable garage tour. A week later, the HOA hosted its first post-reform community event, a neighborhood potluck. It was a deliberate move to repair broken trust and create unity. The new board members set up booths to take suggestions and distribute the updated bylaws, which had been rewritten to remove all the Karen-era nonsense. No more arbitrary fines. No more property seizures. No more mystery bylaws scribbled in Comic Sans. Every change was made with resident input, every vote was publicly counted, and every voice mattered. During the event, someone set up a screen and played a highlight reel of my original Facebook live stream. It was surreal watching myself walk through the junk pile, narrating with sarcastic flair, while hundreds of neighbors laughed and clapped. Even people who had never seen the video before couldn't believe it had actually happened. It felt like the story had taken on a life of its own, part neighborhood legend, part digital folklore. But the biggest surprise came later that evening when I got a call from a producer at a local media outlet. They were doing a feature on modern neighborhood activism and wanted to interview me. At first I thought it was a prank. Then I realized it wasn't. They wanted to cover how a seemingly insignificant act, streaming a garage sale, had triggered a domino effect that reshaped an entire community. I agreed, partly because I thought it'd be fun, and partly because I knew it could help others stuck in the same kind of petty HOA nightmare. The interview went live the following week and brought even more attention. People from other states started messaging me with their own stories, asking for advice, or simply thanking me for standing up. One guy from Ohio wrote, "I've been battling my HOA for years. You just gave me the playbook." A woman from Nevada said she was inspired to run for her HOA board because of the garage saga. It was humbling and hilarious. I had become an unwilling symbol of suburban rebellion, armed with sarcasm, a smartphone, and a lot of donated junk. Of course, not everything was sunshine and confetti. Karen still lived in the neighborhood, albeit in silent disgrace. She no longer attended meetings or posted flyers. Her yard, once meticulously trimmed and pruned like a golf course, had started to look a little unkempt. Some said she was planning to move. Others claimed she'd simply given up. I didn't care either way. She wasn't my problem anymore. Her reign had ended, not with a bang, but with a lava lamp being sold for $40 to a guy named Dave in Oregon. Looking back, I realized this was never just about a garage. It was about being told your rights don't matter, about someone in power believing they're above accountability, and about using whatever tools you have, even a phone and a sense of humor, to push back. In the end, we didn't just take back a physical space. We took back control, voice, and respect. That kind of victory doesn't come often. But when it does, it's worth every box of junk, every HOA notice, and every second of live-streamed chaos. The transformation of my garage into a symbol of neighborhood justice wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of something far bigger than I expected. In the weeks that followed the potluck and HOA reforms, something shifted in the entire community. The neighbors who once darted past one another with awkward nods now lingered to chat. Kids started playing kickball in the cul-de-sac again. There were fewer violation notices taped to doors, and more shared barbecues and lawn chairs appearing on driveways. It felt like a small town had reawakened inside the sterile walls of our HOA-governed suburb. And at the heart of it all was one weird garage that had once been mistaken for a junkyard. I didn't set out to be a community figure or some kind of whistleblowing folk hero, but the attention just wouldn't stop. One afternoon, a local university professor emailed me asking if she could include my story in a lecture about civic engagement in modern neighborhood. She called it a perfect case study of digital resistance in hyper-regulated environments. I had to reread the email twice just to understand what she meant, but eventually agreed. A week later, she sent me a thank you video from her class where students applauded while holding up cardboard signs that said, "Justice for the garage." I laughed so hard I nearly dropped my phone. The new HOA board continued pushing reforms with the help of community input. Elaine, now serving as president, asked me to help draft a new neighborhood charter that would protect resident rights while still keeping things organized. I reluctantly agreed, with the condition that no clause could allow anyone to invade another person's garage ever again. Elaine just smirked and said that was the first rule she wrote down. We created a volunteer committee to ensure transparency in all operations. Every resident now had access to meetings, budgets, and vote results. Even the old HOA newsletter was replaced by a simple, well-written update posted online every month, without typos, threats, or clip art of Karen wagging her finger. As for Karen herself, her presence all but evaporated. Her house sat quiet and mostly dark. Rumors floated that she was trying to sell and move out of state, though she still popped up on neighborhood apps occasionally under an anonymous username that wasn't fooling anyone. Once she tried to claim that the Facebook auction had been a violation of state resale laws. That theory didn't gain traction, especially after one of the city investigators publicly dismissed it during a council meeting. The new joke around town was that Karen was trying to turn HOA law into a Netflix series, equal parts drama, fiction, and delusion. Meanwhile, I decided to use the now famous garage for something positive. With help from a few friends, I converted the space into what I called the neighborhood hub. Half workshop, half hangout zone, it became a place where people could bring items to donate, fix, or give away. The garage that once hosted abandoned mannequin parts now offered tools, shelves, and a community whiteboard with requests like "Need help assembling IKEA chair" or "Looking to borrow a power washer." The most surprising part was how many people actually showed up to help. Gus, the retired veteran, started teaching basic woodworking classes. A teenager named Marcus began hosting a Saturday bike repair hour. Even Terry, the guy with 5 broken lawnmowers, donated one that actually worked. Of course, I kept streaming. Every Saturday, I hosted a short Facebook Live update from the garage, sharing stories from the week, highlighting acts of neighborly kindness, and occasionally auctioning off the last remnants of Karen-era junk. People still loved it. One stream featured a collection of vintage garden gnomes someone had left behind in storage, and it went viral after I made each gnome recite HOA rules in funny voices. Another week, someone sent me a golden plaque that said, "Unofficial Mayor of the Cul-de-sac." I hung it above the garage door, right next to the "Liberated by Facebook Live" sign. It wasn't all fanfare and fun though. There were moments when I had to remind myself how this all began, how it felt to come home and find my private space overrun, my voice dismissed, and my rights treated like a technicality. It was a lesson in how fragile those things are when you're up against people who weaponize rules instead of upholding them. But I never forgot how powerful it felt when I realized I could fight back, not with fists or yelling, but with documentation, humor, and persistence. That feeling became the cornerstone of everything that followed. Then came the City Award. I was in my garage fixing a loose hinge on a donation cabinet when Elaine came in holding an envelope. It was from the mayor's office. They wanted to present me with a Community Impact Award for outstanding digital advocacy and civic engagement. I nearly dropped the screwdriver. At first, I thought it had to be a mistake. But Elaine just grinned and said, "It's about time someone recognized that a little pettiness can do a lot of good." The ceremony was small but heartfelt. I gave a short speech that mostly consisted of jokes about lava lamps and HOA bylaws. My neighbors clapped, cheered, and a few even cried. I accepted the award, not just for me, but for everyone who ever got a violation notice for leaving their trash bins out 15 minutes too long. After the ceremony, someone asked me if I had any regret. I thought about it. About the stress, the threats, the cops at my door, the manic energy it took to film that first live auction, and the chaos that followed. Then I looked around at my neighbors laughing, joking, and connecting in ways they never had before. I looked at the kids drawing on the sidewalk with chalk, at the bulletin board now covered with genuine community announcements instead of HOA warnings, and at my once violated garage now beating like a heart in the middle of our block. And I said no. No regrets at all. In the months that followed, other communities reached out. I did interviews, wrote an op-ed for a national news site, and even got invited to speak at a housing conference. I wore a t-shirt that said Garage Justice, and opened with the line, "Hi, I'm the guy who sold a pile of junk online and took down a suburban tyrant by accident." The room erupted with laughter, but by the end, more than a few people were taking notes and asking serious questions. I realized then how common these battles were, how many people lived under the thumb of petty authority figures who hid behind rules and forms. But perhaps the best ending came quietly, on a calm Saturday morning. I opened my garage and found a box sitting just inside the door. No note, no sender. Just a label that read Karen's Last Box. Inside was a porcelain clown head, a dusty candle, and one very familiar clipboard. At first, I wasn't sure what to do with it. Burn it? Return it? But then I did what I knew the people wanted. I went live. I titled the stream, The Final Purge, told the story of each ridiculous item in my best dramatic voice, and ended by auctioning off the clipboard to the highest bidder, proceeds going to a neighborhood charity. It sold for $65. That was the moment it all came full circle. The garage was finally clear, the community stronger than ever, and Karen's clipboard? Just another memory turned punchline. I logged off with a smile, stepped into the sunlight, and for the first time since that chaotic day when I found junk in my garage, I didn't feel like I had to fight for my space. I already had. And I'd won.